In the summer of 1962, 3 men did something the United States government said was absolutely impossible. They escaped from Alcatraz. Not a small county jail. Not a minimum security facility. Alcatraz, the most feared, most secure, most isolated prison ever built on American soil. Surrounded by the freezing waters of San Francisco Bay. Guarded 24 hours a day. Home to the most dangerous criminals in the country. And yet, they vanished. No one has ever officially found them. And what they left behind changed everything we thought we knew about what a human being is capable of when freedom is the only option. To understand what Frank Morris did, you first need to understand where he did it. Alcatraz Island sits in the middle of San Francisco Bay, 1.5 miles from the shore. The water temperature averages 54 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. The currents are brutal, unpredictable, and unforgiving. The prison itself opened in 1934. It was designed for one purpose: to hold the men that every other prison in America had failed to contain. Al Capone was sent there. Machine Gun Kelly. The Birdman of Alcatraz. In 29 years of operation, there were 14 escape attempts involving 36 men. 23 were caught. 6 were shot and killed. 2 drowned. Not a single person had ever successfully escaped. The warden called it escape-proof. The government called it escape-proof. Frank Morris had other ideas. Frank Lee Morris was not an ordinary criminal. Born in Washington, D.C. in 1926, he was orphaned as a child and spent his entire youth moving between foster homes and juvenile detention centers. By the time he was 13, he had his first arrest. By 30, he had escaped from multiple prisons across the country. Prison officials noted something unusual in his files. Frank Morris had an IQ of 133. Placing him in the top 2% of human intelligence. He wasn't violent. He wasn't reckless. He was a planner. A patient, methodical, extraordinarily intelligent man who had spent his entire life studying one question. How do you get out? When he arrived at Alcatraz in January 1960, he immediately began doing what he always did. He started looking. Morris didn't work alone. He recruited 3 other inmates, John Anglin, Clarence Anglin, and Alan West. Together, they noticed something the guards had missed. The ventilation shafts in their cells, installed decades earlier, had begun to corrode from years of salt air coming off the bay. The concrete around them was soft, weakening, possibly penetrable. For months, they tested it quietly. Using a simple tool, a spoon stolen from the prison cafeteria, Morris began slowly, carefully chipping away at the concrete around his ventilation shaft. Every night. 4 months. While guards made their rounds. While other inmates slept. One scrape at a time. But sound was a problem. Any unusual noise at night would bring the guards immediately. So they waited. Every Tuesday night, the prison hosted a music hour. Inmates could play instruments in their cells. Morris used the noise as cover. The sound of his digging disappeared completely inside the sound of accordions and harmonicas echoing through the cell block. To hide the holes during the day, they created dummy covers, pieces of cardboard painted to look exactly like the original ventilation grates. From a distance, standing at a cell door, a guard could not tell the difference. Above the cell block, accessible through the ventilation shafts, was a utility corridor. Narrow, dark, forgotten. That corridor connected to the roof. And the roof connected to the water. Getting through the wall was only one problem. The water was another. 1.5 miles of freezing, churning bay water stood between Alcatraz and the mainland. Without a flotation device, survival was nearly impossible. So Morris built one. Inside his cell. Under the noses of the guards. Over 50 rubber raincoats, stolen piece by piece from the prison supply, were carefully collected and hidden. Morris and the Anglin brothers spent months hand-stitching them together using a needle improvised from a nail. The result was a 6 by 14-foot rubber raft. Constructed entirely by hand. Inside a maximum security prison. To inflate it, Morris built a concertina, a small accordion-like device, that could pump air into the raft quickly and quietly. They also built life preservers using the same material. They made paddles from pieces of wood collected from the prison workshop. Everything was hidden inside musical instrument cases, beneath floorboards, stuffed inside the utility corridor above the cells. By the spring of 1962, the plan was complete. They had everything they needed. All that remained was the night. June 11, 1962. 9:30 p.m. Lights out at Alcatraz. Before leaving their cells, each man placed a dummy head on their pillow. Constructed from a mixture of soap, toilet paper, and real human hair collected from the prison barbershop, the heads were painted flesh-colored and positioned to look like sleeping inmates. Guards doing their rounds shone flashlights through the cell bars. They saw what they expected to see. 3 men, sleeping quietly. One by one, Morris and the Anglin brothers slipped through the ventilation holes, climbed through the utility corridor, scaled the 50-foot wall to the roof, and descended the kitchen ventilation pipe to the ground below. Alan West, the 4th member, never made it. He had spent less time preparing his ventilation hole. When the moment came, the opening wasn't wide enough. He was left behind. On the northeast shore of the island, Morris and the Anglins inflated the raft, strapped on their life preservers, and pushed off into the black water of San Francisco Bay. At 7:15 the following morning, a guard walked past Frank Morris's cell. The figure on the pillow didn't move. He knocked on the bars. Nothing. He reached through and touched the head. It wasn't Frank Morris. It was soap and paper and someone else's hair. The alarm went off across the island. Every guard. Every boat. Every law enforcement agency in the Bay Area mobilized immediately. Frank Morris was gone. They found the raft, or what was left of it, washed up on Angel Island the next morning. They found a waterproof bag containing photographs and addresses belonging to the Anglin family. They found a wooden paddle floating in the bay. They never found the men. The FBI investigated the case for 17 years before officially closing it in 1979, concluding that Morris and the Anglins most likely drowned in the bay. But the case was never fully closed. The U.S. Marshals Service kept it open, and still considers it active to this day. In 2013, the Marshals received a letter. It was signed, John Anglin. The writer claimed all 3 men had survived, that 2 had since died of illness, and that he himself was elderly and in poor health. He offered to turn himself in exchange for medical treatment. DNA testing on the letter was inconclusive. The man who wrote it, if it was truly John Anglin, was never found. To this day, no confirmed evidence of their death has ever been produced. And no confirmed evidence of their survival has ever been verified. Frank Morris walked into the water on the night of June 11, 1962. And then, he simply ceased to exist. What Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers accomplished in that single night required months of planning, extraordinary patience, and a level of ingenuity that professional engineers have since called genuinely remarkable. They built a raft from raincoats. They carved through concrete with a spoon. They fooled trained guards with soap and hair. And they walked off the most secure island prison in American history. Whether they survived or not, no one has ever proven that they didn't. And somewhere in that uncertainty lives one of the most enduring questions in American criminal history. 3 men went into the water that night. Did any of them come out? Tell me in the comments, do you think Frank Morris survived? I read every single one. I'll see you in the next one.